What's up, comrades? And welcome to another installment of MMT Mondays. I'm Commie John with Real Progressives. And tonight's complimentary MMT lesson comes to us via Warren Mosler. And Warren does a great job of really simplifying the MMT concepts down into easy to understand terms and uses analogies that really do a good job of hammering it home to the layman, I guess.
The whole point of the monetary system, the initial point, or what I would say as a point of logic, the whole point, I know there are other points, lots of lobbyists have all kinds of points in their monetary, is to provision government. Okay? You want to be able to move people from the private sector, move real resources from the private sector to the public sector. People get together. I like these people who get together and say, we hate government. We're just going to get together ourselves and agree to do this. Well, that is government, right? And so you start off and you say, we would like to have an army. We would like to have a legal system. Well, how do you get people to move from the private sector to the public sector? You could ask for volunteers. It doesn't really work all that well. It's been tried. The way that we do it, now they might come up with a better way, is you slap on a tax and something that nobody has, and then in order to get the funds to pay that tax, you've got to come to the government for them, and that way the government can spend its otherwise worthless currency to provision itself. Now, the way I like to do that, to explain that, is I take out my business card here. And I ask, does anybody in this room want to buy? And this is called How to Turn Litter into Money. Does anybody want to buy one of these cards? They're $100? No? Okay. Does anybody want to stay afterwards and help vacuum the floor and clean the room? I'll give you my cards. No. Right. Oh, by the way, there's only one door out of here, and my guy is out there with a 9mm, and you can't get out here without one of these cards. Can you feel the pressure now? You are now unemployed. You are not, in terms of my cards, you were not unemployed before. You were not looking for a job that paid in my cards. Now you're looking for a job that pays my cards, or you're looking to buy them from somebody else who will take a job that pays in my cards.
Bob,
Okay.
do you want to? You could have one more rebuttal, and then we'll move to questions.
Sure. So let me just clarify where I was going with that analogy in case it wasn't obvious. Is I think that's exactly what you say about Social Security. That he said, yeah, it's a phony crisis. You know, people on the right, Tea Party types, might say the government's been spending that money. There is no trust fund. It's underfunded. But no, there's no constraint. They can just print off the money.
There's no nominal crisis.
Okay.
It could be a real crisis if there's not enough food for the people, older people.
Right. Okay.
If there's not enough housing, you can give them all the money you want. You can't buy what isn't there.
But my hypothetical CEO's response is analogous to what you think the guy running Social Security should say.
And again, the difference between the issuer of a currency and the user of a currency. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's government. You know, and I'm not saying that you can't come up with a better system.
And the last thing, there's no one out there with a 9mm. Just to do it, right?
Yeah,
and
for our audience at
in
home,
which case
there's
this
no
thing
idea.
goes from being money back to litter.
I hate vacuuming.
The difference between money and litter is whether there's the tax man. The guy with the 9mm is the tax man.
So
If
let's-
you can't enforce tax collection, the value of the dollar goes to zero.
You know, it's almost irresponsible for our government not to deficit spend. Because as the monopolist, as the issuer of the currency, when the government spends, we have more money to earn and save in the economy. The government's red ink is our black ink. Government spending or public debt is a private surplus. It's as simple as that. Again, enjoy the video, and if you're digging the content, give us a like, subscribe, hit the bell, share the video. Hell, go to Patreon and issue us some currency if you like.
Gold standard, just quickly. I said before, it's the money as an investment vehicle or the money as a tool for the economy. The reason the gold standards failed and people went off and wasn't because they were working so well and everything was so great. It was because there were disasters going on in the countries. And in every country that goes into a war immediately suspends the gold standard. And why would you do that if it was so good for the economy? Because it's not. When you need the economy to go, you abandon gold and you just press on the economy. And then you lose the money's function as an investment vehicle. Well, it's a legitimate political choice whether you want the money to be an investment vehicle and be on a gold standard or just have optimum output and employment. Let's look at the other thing is, and Austrians, of course, will tell you all about monopoly and how it restricts supply. So the way to look at it is the government is the money monopolist. And if it's not spending enough to cover the tax bill and the savings desire, okay, then it either needs to, I would say it either needs to cut taxes or increase spending, depending on your politics. Personally, my proposals now are for a tax cut, but that's not that there aren't appropriate spending things. But the thing is, if the government isn't spending enough, or if taxes are too high to allow for a given amount of government spending, if taxes are too high to not allow for the savings, which nominal savings, not real savings, nominal savings, which are required for all the unspent income that goes into pension funds and everything else, then the result is excess capacity, which we see as unemployment. Now, here's the analogy. You've got a runner who's a really good, strong runner. That's the economy. But the government's put this plastic bag over his head. Okay, and he's done it by not allowing, he's cut his air supply off. He's not giving him enough air to breathe and to, I guess you don't save air. Okay, he's cut him off. And so everybody says, and so when you remove the bag, okay, you're not adding stimulus, you're removing drag. The drag on the economy that's creating the high unemployment is the drag of fiscal policy that's too tight. So all these things that are named stimulus and give it a bad name, they're actually removing drag. It's a question of whether you removed enough drag. So I fully agree that this runner, you can't get something for nothing. You can't pump money in and suddenly, the peaches grow on the trees or whatever happens. It just can't happen. Okay, that's not how you do it. And adequate, and the correct signals for the right capital expenditures are critical. Now, in a private sector, those signals come from sales prospects, and your ability to sell somebody on a business plan that someday is going to sell that product at a profit. Capitalism is driven by profits, which is driven by sales, and that's what's out there. Monopolists restricting supply puts a plastic bag over all that, and that's what's going on right now.
You can just bring the mic right over there. Yeah, that's great.
My name is Yakov. I used to teach here, but now I work in finance. So I have a question as far as this restricting the supply of money. Now, let's suppose we have a floating currency. Let's suppose the sum of this currency in the economy is a million units, right? The amount of money in the system is kind of irrelevant. We can add 10 zeros to it and have a trillion, or a billion, and then we can add 3 more zeros and have a trillion. So the only thing important in an economy is the distribution of the money within the players in the economy. And so if what you're saying is true, is that there's not enough money, well, then we can say, well, tomorrow the government can just announce that we're going to add zeros to all the bills. And now we have a ton more money. But if we nominate everything in the economy, nothing changes. So what you're really saying when you're saying that you want to expand the amount of money in the economy is that you want to change the distribution of the money in the economy, and you want to distort past contracts. So meaning, right, in the past, let's say, imagine if all our bills got an extra zero, but all of our contracts stayed fixed. That would be a huge distortion within the economy.
Warren?
Right. So how do you explain the fact that you're changing the distribution of the money versus changing the amount of money?
How to explain this? So, look, when I tell you guys you need one of these or else you can't get out the door, right? And there's 25 people in this room. There's 5,000 people. No, there's 25 people in this room. And I say, I'm only going to spend 24. Okay? I'm now restricting these things that you need to get out the room. This room is now in default. Somebody's not going to get one. Okay? When I first announced that there's a tax, you're all unemployed until I tell you how you can get the cards, the money, to be able to get out. And to the extent that some of you are going to want 2 or 3, it's going to be more than, the demand is going to be more than 25. The demand is going to be exactly enough to cover your need to pay the tax, plus however many you want to save and take home and give to the kids or keep them in case somebody else pulls this in some other classroom, whatever reason you want to save. There's a law that says their pre-tax money can go into your pension fund, whatever. Okay, so there's going to be a demand to pay taxes and to save and accumulate these cards. If I don't allow this room to somehow get enough to cover the tax bill and the amount you want to save, the result is a restriction of supply by me, the monopolist, and somebody standing here saying, please let me earn another card doing something, which is we call unemployment. There is no unemployment as we define it in a non-monetary society. It's always the demand, somebody looking for paid work in that currency. If there's 10 million people unemployed, I've got 10 million jobs in St. Croix, where I live, in the Virgin Islands, as long as they're able to work for no pay, right? It's about paid work. That's what unemployment's all about. And it's the monopolist restricting supply. And the Austrians will agree that excess capacity is always the result of a monopolist restricting supply. Without it, markets clear, you don't get that. So why, once you recognize the currency is a monopoly, even if you don't like the idea that the currency is a monopoly, it is right now, the next logical step is that, okay, now that I understand the currency is a monopoly, that the monopolist is restricting supply, the monopolist is setting the own rate, monopoly is easy. When you learn economics, monopoly takes about 15 minutes, and then you move on to oligopoly. And when you get that full competition, you got asymptotes and all that complicated stuff, it takes the rest of your life. The good news is, it's the easy one. It's the monopoly. Monopolist is price setter, not price taker. Okay? Go ahead.
We've got to, let's take one up front here. That's good. Yeah, just where you're going. That's fine.
So this question is for Mr. Mosler. If you believe that we have a monopolist restricting the money supply, wouldn't, and you're saying that we're restricting it by putting a plastic bag on the head of a runner, wouldn't falling prices also provide that, to use a different example, the lubricant you require, which a non-monopoly on money would provide?
Okay, no. The answer is when there's a monopolist restricting supply, the markets won't clear. So if I say there's 25 of you and I'm only going to let you earn 20 cards, the price of the card starts going up. The value, and you get your deflation, whatever you want to call it, the value of the money going up, right? And so people are willing to work more and more hours for the cards, and the market will never clear. There will never be enough to cover the tax. It's just that the system's in default.
Right there.
And that's true with any monopoly. So, when Bob was talking about there's a problem with relative prices, he's talking about market clearing. There's some wage where you will get full employment, which is true in the absence of monopoly. I think he'll be the first to agree that with labor unions, that's not going to happen. You're going to get excess capacity, and the same thing is true when the currency is a public monopoly, or a monopoly. It happens to be a public monopoly, where when the monopolist restricts supply, you get excess capacity. You don't have market clearing, and that's what we're seeing today. And it doesn't matter if wages drop. You're still not going to get market clearing. You're just going to get lower wages, less spending. You've got the problem of, I'm taxing you guys 25 cards and I'm only letting you earn 20. And you're going to have this downward spiral, and it's in default. And it can't work because it's a monopoly. Okay, and I can't emphasize that enough. And the Austrians agree that monopoly is the problem with markets. And they all the models assume competitive markets. And so all I'm asking is if they pick up the idea that the currency itself is a monopoly, apply that to their models, I think they'll get the same answers I do on all of these things. In terms of, I want to get in a word about inflation. And just to give the principle first, when you've got a monopolist is price setter, not price taker. This means the price level is necessarily a function of prices paid by government when it spends and or collateral demanded when it lends. I'm not, closing remarks, I can't go into detail on that, but it's like these cards. If I tell you you got to work an hour for one of them, they might exchange between you for $30 each. If I tell you you got to work 2 hours to get them, they might be $60 each. Okay? I'm the price setter. They're my cards. You need my cards to get out of your room. We need the government's money to pay the tax. The government decides the terms of exchange, whether it knows it or not. It doesn't know it, and so it tries to do all this market nonsense, but it doesn't know it. Okay, so let's see. Wrapping it all up, let's look at central banks and inflation. Okay, for 20 years, the Bank of Japan has been trying as hard as it can to create inflation and failed. Okay, that's a central bank with every tool available. Now you can say it's an exception and everything else, fine. The Fed has been trying as hard as it can for 5 years to create inflation. $85 billion a month in QE, and the numbers just came out Friday and today. It's failed, even in this last thing. Okay, maybe it's not that easy for a central bank to create inflation. Okay, everybody's acting like we're on this edge, and if one false move out of Bernanke or Bank of Japan or the European, and it's going to be hyperinflation. These guys are trying with throwing everything they can possibly think of, trying to create it and failing. Okay, there's more to it here. It's not that simple. And if you look at all the inflation cases, the actual ones, it's there are always extenuating circumstances that involved.
So there you have it. A simple case of monopoly. The government is the monopolist of the currency. They have the sole issuing power of the dollar. The government literally creates money into existence. And if you follow that logic, it would tell you that the government cannot be broke, doesn't have to borrow money from China or anyone, and furthermore, the government doesn't need our tax dollars in order to spend. Now, taxes play some important roles, but a source of revenue for the federal government, they are not. And the reason that's so important is because when we have the discussion for progressive policy implementation, like we push the discussion to Congress for Medicare for all, or a Green New Deal, or free college, what we're always told is that the government's broke. We have to borrow money from China, we're in debt, and where are you going to find the tax dollars to pay for this stuff? And again, it's all nonsense. It's bullshit. And they send us on these wild goose chases to find tax dollars to pay for things, knowing that taxes don't pay for anything, and there's never going to be enough tax dollars there to cover all the government spending. It's frustrating. But again, this is why we need to learn this stuff, so we can go to our representatives armed with this knowledge of how things work. And that's what this is. That's what life is. It's a big learning process. And I guess, all I ask is that y'all keep an open mind and you keep searching for the truth. That's all I got for you guys this evening. And again, if you're digging the content, give us a like, a subscribe, hit the bell, share the video, and hit us up through Patreon. Give us a few bucks if you can, so we can keep bringing you this legit content without corporate influence or censorship. Again, thanks guys for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Commie John. Stay vigilant, comrades.